Hello and welcome to It'll Be Alright in the 90s. The world of podcasts is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. This podcast would be the coffee cream. Distinctly lacking in mass appeal, but enjoyed by a small, loyal and somewhat fanatical fan base. I'm your host, Alex Greenwood, and I'm joined by my co-host, Stu Joslin. Stu, how are you?
Can you imagine the absolute uproar there would be if there was ever any threat of us being removed from the world of podcasts, like there always is with the coffee creams and the coffee-flavoured sweets? Like you say, there's a small but dedicated band of people who just wouldn't let it happen over their dead bodies. And I see the It'll Be Alright in the 90s fan base as part of that. So, yes, I'm absolutely fine. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Yes, I'm good. The reference to the box of chocolates is, of course, a reference to a film from 1994, and that is because we are talking about the films of 1994 later. But before we get to that, Stu, I know you're a massive fan of garlic, so this episode's sponsor will be right down your street, because today's episode is sponsored by Claret's. So head to any participating store and quote the code ALLRIGHT90s to get 5% off a packet of Claret's. That's either the mints or the chewing gum, and a free pin badge. So that's this episode's sponsor, Claret's, the breath freshener with Actizol.
If you're a big fan of garlic like me, you don't want to punish your friends and family with the after effects of a garlic binge. So this offer from Claret's is absolutely perfect to freshen yourself up before you go back out into the world. Nobody will ever even know that you've been chewing on a clove. So many thanks to the guys at Claret's for sorting us out. Much appreciated.
Time now for a little bit of correspondence. We always appreciate all your missives and messages. So thank you very much to Hannah for sending this in. Legend of the Pod, Hannah, I should say. She says, I've just been listening to your Christmas pod episode, and I thought about the most 90s toy craze, which was the question we asked in that episode. Mm-hmm. And she said, I thought of Furbies. I had one and I loved it. I remember it being a real craze and my mum having trouble getting hold of them for me at the Christmas that they came out. It was the first toy like it. It was the next step up from a Tamagotchi. The Furby actually learnt to speak from you. Looking at pictures of it now, they look really creepy. Did you have a Furby, Stu? I remember them being, very big.
Absolutely, yeah. They were the must-have Christmas toy in, right at the end of the 90s, I think, 1999 maybe. I remember a lad called Luke Coleman brought his into school and it caused all sorts of havoc. You're just sort of chipping away in lessons and things like that. So, I mean, a great shout from Hannah, but no, not one that I ever experienced firsthand, I have to say.
Yeah, I was the same. I never had one, but it was. Well, I was going to say slightly after my time, but I don't know if it was that. Maybe it was just that I was too creeped out by those weird eyes. And yeah, I mean, they definitely did look quite creepy, especially compared to Tamagotchis and whatnot. And the other thing I have in the mailbag, now, Stu, this might interest you especially. This is from Angela. She says, I was intrigued by your podcast, so I had a listen today. And this actually relates to our Soap Operas podcast, which was a few months back now.
Mm-hmm. With Will.
And she said, yes, with Will Hodgson, Barbara the Pod. And Angela says, it was weird for me to listen to. I cast the Mitchell brothers, brackets, I only worked on EastEnders for a couple of years. But I remember being at Elstree for their first day and security ringing me confused as they thought they'd let the same actor in twice. They did once look like each other, if you can believe it. I also cast El Dorado. What shenanigans we had in Spain. Brackets, I won't mention the standards of casting. And as for the bill, I cast that on and off for 28 years. So I don't know what your followers' numbers are like or their demographic. But if you ever need any contacts, I might be able to help.
Oh my, that is fantastic. Wow. Angela, thank you so much. Oh, that's unbelievable. Oh, that's absolutely wonderful. Well, yes, I'm so glad you enjoyed the episode. And if you do have the actor who played PC Dave Quinnan's number, then yes, please do forward it on to us because we'd love to get him on. But no, that's absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, thanks a lot, Angela, for sending that in. That's one of the most exciting messages we've had for some time.
Quick look at the pod bulletin board. First of all, a bit of a news roundup since we've been off air. Alex, Woolworths could return to British high streets. This is a story that broke in late January about the Woolworth brand, which is surviving on the streets of Germany, wanting to possibly come over and take over some of the now empty Wilko branches around the UK, sadly. So look out for the Woolworth name coming back. Maybe we could get them to sponsor us again if they do come back to the UK, start them off on the right foot. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that would really give them a boost when they were making those first tentative steps back into the high street. So yeah, get in touch, Woolworths, if you need our help. We'd be absolutely delighted to get involved.
I can't believe that this podcast hasn't had something to do with that, by the way. I think they've definitely been listening over there in Germany and wanting to ride the wave of our popularity. You know,
Yes.
looking back at the 90s, want to bring some of the old brands back. I think it's their perfect opportunity to do that. Speaking of Germany, you asked me on the last episode to give you some of our listener statistics.
Oh, yes, of course, yes.
And I have them here. Are you ready for this?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, so I've been meaning to do this for a while. I don't think it will surprise you to hear that 91% of our listeners are based in the UK. Of that 91%, 95% are based in England. So come on, Wales and Scotland, you're lagging behind here. We need some more listeners in the Celtic countries. Come on.
Yeah, Mark from Glasgow, start spreading the word.
Yeah, absolutely, please. As our Scottish correspondent, you owe us this.
Yeah. Yeah, our listeners owe us.
Next country on the list, 3% of our listenership is in the US in various states. But then it gets interesting when you look at the countries that make up 1% or fewer of our listenership. And I would like to say a big hello to our faithful listeners in, variously, India, Nepal, Romania, Israel, Malta, Japan, Peru, Germany, Albania, Malaysia, Thailand, and Jersey.
Oh, wow.
So hello to you guys.
Yeah, or to hello to you, Guy, if you're just an avid traveller who's also a loyal listener. But fantastic. Yeah, what is the fan base like out there in Peru? I wonder if they have meetups over there. Just down in Lima, there's an Irish pub or somewhere where they all gather around and have a weekly or a fortnightly listening party. Maybe that would be great.
I'd like to think so. The Peru chapter of the It'll Be Alright in the 90s fan base. Yeah, I like that idea, definitely. That's just some of the places that we've been listened to throughout the world. So I just wanted to say hello and thank you to all of you in those places.
Just to confirm, Jersey is a tax haven, isn't it? Am I right in thinking Jersey is like a place where people register accounts for to avoid tax? I'm just thinking, with the stuff that's going on with Jeff. Mm-hmm. And all that Masonic stuff, is there maybe some connection there?
You're saying that he's listening back to our episodes from his tax vault hole in Jersey to make sure that we're not saying anything too offensive or libelous.
Well, you know how often he is out of the office. He's got to be somewhere. All these times he's away. So that's there you go.
That's true. I've got a very entertaining story about my mother and father on holiday in Jersey, which I must tell you at some point during the 90s as well. So it fits onto the pod. You asked me for a Tamagotchi update. The update is there isn't much of an update. I switched it on after we recorded our first episode of the series, and it needs more upkeep and attention than my real actual pet does.
Yes.
Far more attention and upkeep than a man who has a full-time job and several demanding hobbies is able to give to it. So after about an hour, I had to take the battery out.
Wow, you put it down so quickly.
I wouldn't say I put it down because it hadn't hatched properly. It was still a baby. So I was just having a foray into Tamagotchi ownership, if you like. But I think it's going to have to wait until I've got sort of like 2 weeks off work at some point. And then I can give it my full attention. So apologies for the lack of Tamagotchi update to those of you who were looking for it. Lastly, Alex, I think it's worth mentioning that you had a decades-old mystery solved by a great website that we've stumbled upon over the past couple of weeks. Would you like to tell us a bit more about that?
Yes, this was the discovery of a website. Well, it was a discovery by you, Stu. It was you that found it and passed it on to me, much to my chagrin, as it turned out, in terms of my productivity for the last week or two. It is the Can Museum website, which is a fantastic archive of drinks cans from decades and decades into the past, right up to the present day. And it's got every sort of can that I personally wanted to find. I found it on there. It's got everything. It's an incredible website. It's canmuseum.com. The can that you referred to that I've been trying to solve the mystery of, 30 years, I guess, was a can of Panda lemonade. And it was something that I remember being sold in vending machines in our local leisure centre of the day, which was the Springfield Centre in Corsham, and it was just a mental image, and I had started to doubt myself that it ever existed, and lo and behold, there it was on the website, on the Can Museum itself. If you just go to the Panda section and look for the 90s cans of lemonade, there it is. And yeah, the whole website, incredible resource.
It really is a great website, and they've been very nice to us in our exchanges on social media as well. So many thanks to the Can Museum for that, and please do keep up the great work, because it is a very, very interesting resource, and we do encourage you all to go and check it out for yourselves. Time now for the glorious return of What's the Most 90s after the farrago in the last episode, which I apologise for again. But we do have a doozy to start us off for the year. This one's been waiting in the wings for a while, but it's time to finally unleash it. It's a big one. Alex, what do you think is the most 90s album cover?
It is a really good question. Absolutely. And a good one to come back with for the new series. There's lots of different sort of genres you can go down for this, I think. And there were lots of options. And I've gone for maybe a slightly obscure one for the UK. It was a massive album in America. And it's Human Clay by the Christian rock band Creed. Are you aware of this? Well, you must be aware of the band, Stu.
I am, yes.
Are you aware of the album cover?
I'm not, no.
So it was released in September 1999 and went on to become one of the best-selling albums in US history. Now, Stu, are you looking up the album cover now?
I am.
Could you describe what you see there?
Okay, so it's the album that's got With Arms Wide Open on it, which is the Creed song that I'm most familiar with, so I suppose that's a start. There is a humanoid figure rising out of sort of grass or sand, holding something in their outstretched right hand and screaming into the atmosphere.
Yes. It's an odd album cover, isn't it? It's hard to tell exactly what is going on, what it's representing. But I picked it because this is an album cover from the era where computer graphics were not in their infancy, but in that point where they were not quite good enough to do decent work, really, but they were more advanced than they had been in the late 80s and early 90s. So graphic designers and artists were starting to really utilize it or try and utilize it, but it just never looked very good. And it aged within about 5 minutes. All the album covers that use this sort of technology just may have looked cutting edge for such a short amount of time, but now they just look so dodgy. And this is, I think, a prime example of it. I do recommend listeners go and look it up. Human Clay by Creed is the album cover, and yeah, it's just a weird image. The font that the text is in is just really sort of basic Microsoft font, from a drop-down list, and the image is bizarre. And apparently, I looked it up, and it was designed by the brother of the guitarist, Mark Tremonti. So I don't know if he's a professional graphic designer or if it was just a kind of helping your brother out sort of job. But it was such a big selling album that the cover is quite iconic. But I think it just represents a very specific era of 90s graphic design and the sort of the in-between phase for computer design. And that's why I've chosen it. So, yeah, what about you?
Well, it's not often that we go for something that we don't really like on a What's the Most 90s, is it? But I can certainly understand the reasons why you've chosen it. I think that Mark Tremonti's brother probably only had access to Microsoft Paint by the looks of this. But I would also like to pick an album from 1999. And it might not surprise you in the end to hear that I've gone with one of my favourite albums of the decade, and indeed I still have to say of all time. I've gone for the cover of Performance and Cocktails by Stereophonics.
Nice.
Are you familiar with this cover at all?
I am, because it was one of the first albums I ever... Well, I didn't buy it. I got it out of the library and taped it onto cassette. I'm sorry. I've done it again. But it was an album I was very keen on at the time, and I am familiar with it, but I am going to bring it up again just to remind myself exactly what it looked like.
If you've got it there, could you describe what you're seeing then for the listener?
So it's black and white, and the foreground is a couple kissing, where the woman in the couple looks, I would say, very bored. She's sort of looking up, not really concentrating. The bloke is far more into it. And then in the background, you've got some other people, just random strangers, and what looks like a fairly industrial background. and the classic Stereophonics logo there. And again, quite a basic font for performance and cocktails.
I think you'll find that font is actually Courier New for the name of the album there.
Yeah.
So it wasn't until years later that I found out that this photograph was actually taken at a football pitch next to the Westway in London. So I presume it's one of those ones with a cage around it, so that's like a sort of five-a-side facility. Taken by Scarlett Page, who's the daughter of Jimmy Page, and has done a lot of the Stereophonics sort of album photography over the years. And this one is just really special to me because it was, like you, it was one of the first albums that I really ever got into. It was the single Pick Apart That's New that drove me towards the album. And it's been a constant companion ever since. What I was able to find out is that in 2007, an interview was conducted in the Sunday Times with the female model you can see there, who was then a 27-year-old mother of two called Lucy Joplin. So again, a close match with my own surname there, which might also count for something or not, I don't know. In the interview, she explained that the faraway look in her eyes was the result of an evening consuming absinthe and opium, and that she was paid £75 in cash for the shoot. And then there's a little addendum here. The name of the then 23-year-old male model is Kip Burns, who was on loan from Monique Models in the King's Road in London. So there we go. We've got the positive ID on both of the models there in the picture. I think it's possibly the most iconic Stereophonics album cover, certainly. Recorded at Real World in box in part as well, so a local production. And I just couldn't really think of anything that I would say is a more 90s album cover than this. So that's what I've gone for.
Fantastic. And it's nice to have one that you did actually care about, something that you really liked, unlike mine. So a good bit of balance there. But Stu, we have some more input on this, don't we? It's not just us who is deciding what the most 90s album cover is. We have our friends at the Pop Collaborate and Listen podcast with their view on this. So let's hear what they think.
Hey folks, this is Dave and Krista from Pop Collaborate and Listen. Thank you for asking our opinions on this one. Wow, the most 90s album cover. It's a big topic, man. Where'd you go for this? Early 90s, the late 90s? Do you look at the iconic pop albums of the time?
We got the whole Britpop thing in the middle of the 90s. We've got some of the grunge stuff right at the start. Yeah. There's a lot of different genres.
We've got the kind of crazy bad hip hop, the Master P era.
I'll tell you what, man. There are some of the. I think there was one company that did so many of those album covers, and if you look at them, you go, "Oh, that's made by this guy."
Yeah, Master P, Silk the Shocker.
Dreadful,
terrible stuff. Terrible,
awful.
Yeah, terrible stuff. You got new metal came through. Obviously, you had the fractal dance movement. You remember that?
Oh, mate. Again, right? The reason we do our podcast is we're listening to every single number one album of the 90s. So it's not just, oh, well, we like this, we're going to talk about it. We have to do all the bad ones as well.
Oh, yeah.
And so there's
more bad than good.
It really is. We're coming across some stuff that I'd never seen before. And the early part of the 90s especially, people seem to be just going, all right, what is the most weird computer-generated effect we can put on here?
Or how badly can we abuse this embryonic Photoshop?
Yeah, really bad. And so there's a lot of that. The dance ones were obviously very bad for it because they were all on the drugs.
Yeah.
So yeah, you got that. Is that the most typical 90s? Is that the question?
I don't know, because you can think about, like, is there a lot of neon, a lot of Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, those type of colours?
Absolutely.
I would say though, if we ignore all of these great iconic album covers, I'm sure other people will bring up. Really, I think if you're trying to distill the 90s down into one image, I think there can be very little doubt that the first thing that would come into everyone's mind, the 90s as pure as it possibly can be. There is no other album that you could possibly consider than the eponymous album by our Lord and Saviours, Sinead, Adele, Kiwi, Lindsay. Of course, I'm speaking about
of the wonderful Bewitched. Yeah, their debut album, 1998. If you look at that album cover,
let's have a look at it.
That is quite something.
I mean, it's got everything you need. You've got a wacky logo. You've got too many stars. Too many stars.
Sure. You've got just all the different bright colours. The pop sensibilities going overboard on it.
Well, yeah, but not take anything away from the muted denim tones of the various double denims and brightly trained women that we have.
But everything about it is just pure 90s. It's the hairstyles, it's the fashion. It's like, oh, well, this font looks like it might look good if you made it look shiny.
Yeah.
Bright colours. just classic 90s.
Yeah, I think Bewitched are only the band that the Spice Girls could have been.
Could have been, indeed.
Anyway, I think that's our take on that, guys. We haven't yet reviewed the Bewitched album, but it's coming.
It's on the way. It's in the post.
Cheers for having us on, guys. Love the pod. See you later.
See ya!
What do you think about that then, Stu?
Well, I mean, that is another iconic 90s album. I remember very well the first Bewitched album coming out, and it's a great cover with them all jumping up in the air. A really strong 90s pop look with the orange background and the double denim going on. So that is a really strong, that's a really strong contender as well, I have to say.
Yeah, and I really appreciated the referencing of the album covers from Master P's No Limit hip hop label, because as the guy said, they were universally terrible and really, yes, of their time, really kind of, yeah, iconic in kind of the wrong ways, I suppose. So I'm glad that got a mention. What are we going to put in the ledger then, Stu? What are we going to decide on?
Well, we've spoken about some goodies, we've spoken about some baddies, haven't we? But I think, I mean, I know what my heart's saying is that you've obviously gone with one that demonstrates the limitations of the technology that was being used at the time, and really shows that up. And I really think for a classic, iconic album cover shot, for me, it's still Performance and Cocktails. It's very rare that I go for my own shout, but I think it even beats the Bewitched front cover into a cocked hat here. So yeah, my heart is with Performance and Cocktails.
Okay, I'll let you have it. I know it means a lot to you, and it is the best album of those three, so let's put it in the ledger.
Thank you, mate. Much obliged.
Time now to continue our quest through the films of the decade. We've arrived at 1994, and we're delighted to be joined by former brother of the pod and now legend of the pod, Adam Greenwood. Adam, how's it going?
Not too bad, thanks. For a second there, I thought you were sort of renouncing me as a brother, but yeah, it's brother of the pod rather than actual.
Yes. Well, there was that moment where Stu, you asked me how many brothers I had, and I said 0 because I was confused for a moment.
You did. I was about to say you've already renounced him on the podcast, so yeah. I'm amazed that you've come back on at all, Adam. To be fair.
So as usual, we will be going through our personal picks. We've each picked 3 films that we want to talk about from the year, and there is going to be a little bonus intermission activity which Adam has brought with him, which is very exciting. So we'll get to that in a bit. But to kick off, we need to do our usual trawl to the awards and the charts. Stu, do you want to give us the top 10 highest grossing films of 1994?
Certainly, as usual, I've got the list of the top 10 highest grossing films of the year. At number 10, it's Clear and Present Danger. Number 9, Interview with the Vampire. Number 8, 4 Weddings and a Funeral. At 7, it's Dumb and Dumber. Number 6 is The Flintstones. Number 5 is Speed. Number 4, The Mask. Number 3, True Lies. Number 2, Forrest Gump. And at number 1, by almost $100 million, is The Lion King.
Not a bad top 10, I don't think. I will say, though, those top 2 really do... There's a big gap between those top 2 and number 3, isn't there? The Lion King and Forrest Gump really almost twice as much as number 3. So
you're right. Yes, I didn't spot that. The gap between number 2 and number 3 in the list is almost $300 million.
It's crazy, isn't it? As for the awards, the best film from the BAFTAs was 4 Weddings and a Funeral. The best director was Mike Newell for 4 Weddings and a Funeral. Best actor was Hugh Grant for 4 Weddings and a Funeral. And the best actress was Susan Sarandon for The Client. At the Oscars, the best film was Forrest Gump. The best director was Robert Zemeckis for Forrest Gump. The best actor was Tom Hanks for Forrest Gump. And the best actress was Jessica Lange for Blue Sky. So it's sort of Forrest Gump in America and 4 Weddings and a Funeral in the UK as far as the awards go. Nothing too shocking there, I don't think. Though the best original song was "Can You Feel the Love Tonight" by the Lion King. That's not how we refer to Elton John, is it? Elton John and Tim Rice, I believe. And in terms of the Golden Raspberry Awards, the most important award ceremony, of course, the worst picture was The Colour of Night, which I've never heard of. The worst actor was Kevin Costner for Wire Earp, which is I don't agree with. The worst actress was Sharon Stone in Intersection. Oh, and The Specialist. So she had 2. She was one of those award winners who won it for 2 different performances in the same year. And then I will just say what the worst supporting actor was, because it's a little bit unusual. It was O.J. Simpson for The Naked Gun 33 and a third, because he was on trial for murder at the time of his win in this category. So a little bit different there from the normal award winner.
Mm-hmm. Just before we move on from the awards, have you got the Golden Globes there, or do we still not really give a about them?
Well, we don't give a damn about them, but I have them here, so I'm going to point out that the best drama, or the best, they split their films into drama and comedy and musical. Well, comedy and musical is one category. That was The Lion King. The drama was Forrest Gump. Director was Robert Zemeckis for Forrest Gump. Actor was Tom Hanks again. And the best actress was Jessica Lange. So actually exactly the same as the Oscars.
Before we move on from the Razzies, which is what we call the Golden Raspberry Awards when you're like,
well, you're in a business, aren't you?
Yeah. I don't know if you noticed that Jim Carrey was nominated for all 3 of his films that came out this year as the worst new star, which I think is so strange considering how huge he became and how sort of iconic that sort of period of his career is. I mean, he didn't win. It was Anna Nicole Smith who won for Naked Gun 33 and a third. But the fact that all 3 of his films, Dumb and Dumber, The Mask, and Ace Ventura, were all put forward as like, he is the worst new star for his performance in these films. So is quite strange to think back on now.
Yeah, that is really odd and a bit laughable, isn't it, really? I know, I mean, we'll come to it with some of those films, but then they're not the sort of films where he's going to really showcase his serious acting chops like he did later with Eternal Sunshine and Truman Show and stuff. But
and Bruce Almighty. I mean, let's not forget that.
Yes, of course. But for what they are, they're good performances, I'd have said. But yeah.
Another thing from the Razzies, I don't know how easy this is going to be to do, but if can you get away with playing clips of music, or will the podcast be taken down?
We always like to run that risk.
Yeah,
we break the rules.
I don't know if you can drop in a clip from "Can You Feel the Love Tonight?" because I'm assuming we're all sort of relatively familiar with it.
And can you feel the love tonight? It is where we are.
It's obviously very moving, very sort of. I just wanted to sort of compare that to the Razzies' worst song of the year, which is "Marry the Mole," written by Barry Manilow, which was in Thumbelina.
Here comes the bride is a lovely little ditty, but marrying for love is a foolish thing to do, 'cause love won't pay the mortgage or put porridge in your bowl. Dearie, marry the mole.
Well, you sort of get the idea there. And the things that I wanted to say is, if you listen to the whole thing, it's amazing how often they sort of skirt towards sort of setting you up to think that they're going to. There's a lot of words that end in "itty," and you think surely they're not going to. They're not going to go for the obvious rhyme, but they sort of shoehorn in so many. It just seems as if they were deliberately trying to make you think that. I'm assuming you've not seen Thumbelina, either of you.
No.
No, me neither. So listening to that, the woman singing that song was 73 or 74 when she recorded that. And then when you watch the video, it is not a 73 or 74-year-old looking character. So it's very jarring to watch the actual video. He's like,
you sure it wasn't Barry? It's not Barry Manilow, is it? Because he does look a little bit like a 73-year-old woman.
No, it is. It's quite the voice acting is quite jarring with the character design. Is the most succinct way to put it, I think.
All right, let's get on with our choices then. We've each picked 3, as I mentioned. So let's start with you, Stu. What's the first film you want to talk about?
Well, seeing as we've just been discussing it in a roundabout way, I will go for The Lion King to start us off, the biggie of the year. Released June the 15th, 1994, directed by Roger Allers and Rob Minkoff. I think this is the greatest animated movie of the 90s and possibly still of all time. Any dissent about that in the room?
I don't think it is, no. I think
okay.
I think it's. Did you say the best animated film of all time, or the best Disney animated film of all time?
Well, no, I've gone big. I've gone with greatest animated movie of all time. Yeah,
That's massive, Stu. That's such a big claim. I mean, I think it's definitely one of the best Disney ones. I'm not going to question that. I'm more of a fan of Ghibli animated films, and I would say maybe, what beats Watership Down? But it's one of Disney's greats. So
it absolutely is. Yeah. It absolutely is. I mean, it's the classic sort of retelling of Hamlet, and parts of the Bible story are in there as well. I don't remember seeing this at the time it actually came out. I suppose I must have done, because I would have been exactly at the right age to watch and enjoy this, and I'm sure I must have done. I just don't remember it. I did watch it in the cinema in 3D when it was reissued in 3D in around 2011. So I have had the pleasure of seeing it in the cinema, which is obviously a good thing. I do the thing at the start when young Simba gets held up as the new heir to the throne. I do that with my own cat all the time. I think it's really funny to do that. And also a performance for the ages by Jeremy Irons as the Imperious Scar. And yeah, I didn't think we could start this discussion really, or have this discussion, without mentioning The Lion King, because it's at the top of the grossing list of the year for a reason, I think.
I was at the wrong age, I think, when it came out. I was just sort of maybe like a little bit too old to be interested. So it's never been one that I've felt particularly fondly of. And I've probably only seen it once or twice. I think the songs are sort of undeniably good. Like, you can't really have Elton John doing a soundtrack in it and it not be good, really. And I have a very distinct memory of Alex having the VHS tape of it as a birthday or Christmas present, and it sort of being on the shelf in our parents' house. Possibly still is there now, I'm not too sure.
Probably, yeah. I actually entered a competition on Blue Peter to win a VHS of The Lion King. This was obviously before I owned it. And I remember the next day, them announcing the winners, scrolling along the bottom. It was like the name and the town they were from. And it was like loads of people won. It wasn't just one person. And bearing in mind, I'm Alex Greenwood from Corsham. Someone had won it. It was called Alex Greenwood from Horsham in Sussex.
No.
Can you believe that? How weird that is. I remember going to school the next day and people saying, "Oh, you won." And I was like, "No, that wasn't me. That was my doppelganger from Horsham." That's my main memory of the VHS, which I never actually won, but just a weird little thing that happened related to this film. But I think it's definitely entered the sort of the list of classic Disney films, along with like Bambi and Snow White and those older ones. I think it's one of the later ones. I mean, in my mind, it still feels quite recent, but of course it's 30 years old now. But it's one of the later classic ones, I would say.
It is considered a classic, and it sort of infiltrated the sort of cultural consciousness in a way that people now who probably haven't seen it will know enough about it to be able to understand references like the Simba being held up, and it's still regularly used in memes and things like that, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
One more thing on this before we move on. The former Aston Villa winger, Leandro Bacuna, was known amongst Villa fans, of course, as Bacuna Matata. So I just wanted to put that in there and record it for posterity.
Remember who you are.
No, please, don't leave me.
Remember.
Father!
Remember.
Don't leave me.
Remember.
Right, Adam, what's your first film you want to talk about?
Well, I'm going to pick this one. I haven't actually watched it all the way through. I sort of left it a little bit too late, but Pulp Fiction is the first film I want to talk about. I think this is only the second time possibly that I've watched it, which is strange considering how big a film it was and how much I think I liked it the first time. I think for some reason I just sort of haven't come back to it yet, always thinking, oh, I'll watch that at some point. I'll watch that again at some point. I was expecting to not like it as much as I remembered liking it, if you see what I mean. I thought it was going to have dated poorly. But for the most part, I think it still is really good. There's a few obviously quite dated moments in it, and there's quite a few slurs which I don't think would really make it into a film like that these days, and a slightly sort of potentially problematic like plot point with like the gay rape in it. I don't know if that would be really written like that these days, but overall, still like a great film, and probably the first film that I remember any of my friends buying the CD soundtrack of.
Yeah, iconic soundtrack for sure. Stu, have
Um,
you seen it?
I have. I've seen it once. 2 movies with iconic soundtracks that we've discussed already. Maybe that's going to be a theme that runs through, although I'm not sure Naked Gun 33 1/3 has an iconic soundtrack. So maybe the run will end there. But I've seen it for the first time in the past 12 months. And yeah, I could definitely see why it's considered a classic. I agree with you on the fact that it maybe wouldn't be written or made in the same way that it is today. But any film that has a John Travolta dancing scene in it, which was actually the basis of a question in the recent Only Connect final, which I was happy to get at the 2-point mark, is okay by me. So yeah, no, enjoyed it a lot.
There was something I sort of picked up on when I watched it, which is that all of his films feel like they were made in the 70s, even though that one was set in the present day when it was made. So it's set in the 90s, but feels like it was made in the 70s, which is sort of like I can't really quite put my finger on it, whether it was just the things that he was influenced by, or it was obviously the music choices, or the fact that it's shot on film stock, which makes it look more classic. I don't know. I couldn't quite tell you exactly why it is, but I feel like a lot of his films feel like they were made not at the time they were made.
What did you think of Tarantino's cameo? Is that the biggest sort of cameo or part that he's had in any of his movies? Because I know he's done it a lot.
He was in, I can't remember if it's Django Unchained or The Hateful Eight, where he plays like a slave owner with doing a terrible Australian accent.
Yeah, okay. That's Django Unchained.
Django and Unchained. Obviously he's in From Dusk Till Dawn quite a bit more. That's not really a cameo though.
He's in Reservoir Dogs as well, isn't he? He's
Mr.
Pink,
of course, yeah. So Stu, you're wrong. No, it's
okay. No, that's fine. I accept that.
I haven't actually got to in my rewatch. I haven't got to his cameo in this, and that was a part that I was sort of mentally like steeling myself for, because I think it's quite heavy with like the N word, and I knew that was going to be quite jarring to revisit now. I don't know how jarring it was at the time.
Yeah, I mean that was where his feud with Spike Lee started, wasn't it? Because Spike Lee called him out on that right from Pulp Fiction, and as they've sort of argued about it ever since. So I think it was questioned even back in '94, but I mean, there's no, as far as I'm concerned, there's no excuse for it now or then. But it was, it's quite shocking to watch it now.
It feels like a bit of a red flag that he is the writer and director, and he's written a part for himself to play that throws the N-word around so frequently. Yeah.
Stu, I'm sure that you, like me, sort of conflate Pulp Fiction with The Simpsons parody of it. I kind of blur them in. They're almost like the same thing to me. One of the classic Simpsons episodes, or segments of a Simpsons episode, even with the Pulp Fiction parody.
I'm sure there's a myriad of things where I've blurred the lines between the Simpsons version and the real version, and Pulp Fiction is just one of those.
Yeah.
There's a period, isn't there? I feel like people in our sort of generation, or my generation, your generation possibly, who will watch classic films and be like, oh, I now understand that joke in The Simpsons, whereas it should have been the other way around. You'd be like, oh, that joke is a reference to this, that joke is a reference to that.
This is a tasty burger. Vincent, you ever had a Big Kahuna burger?
Right, so the film I'm going to talk about first is a good link, actually, because it's connected to Quentin Tarantino, and it also has a great soundtrack. It's Natural Born Killers, directed by Oliver Stone, but from an original script or screenplay from Quentin Tarantino, so there's the link, starring Woody Harrelson, Juliette Lewis, Tommy Lee Jones, and Robert Downey Jr., Woody Harrelson getting at least his second mention on my list for these film episodes we're doing after White Men Can't Jump. For anyone who doesn't know, it's kind of like a Bonnie and Clyde style violent couple on the rampage across America story. And then there's a psychopathic cop played by Tom Sizemore. Robert Downey Jr. plays this sort of crazy egomaniac journalist who's sort of following the whole thing. And I watched it again last week in preparation for this episode. It used to be one of my favorite films, and I still do really like it. I wouldn't describe it as one of my favorites anymore, but it is still so shocking. It's so violent. Like, it makes Pulp Fiction look like, like The Simpsons, basically. It's so violent. On IMDb, someone has counted all the people that get killed, and it has a body count of 145, which is quite a lot when you're not talking about a war film. And I just... Yeah, I mean, I liked it when I was a teenager because I think it's the sort of film that is going to appeal to a certain sort of teenage boy. I think it was kind of that sort of thing where it had lots of swearing in it, had Rage Against the Machine on the playlist, had cool actors in it, like a really cool aesthetic. And I think as much as I still think it's really shocking and it's a little bit dated in certain ways, I still think it does hold up as a cool film. It's like a nice kind of period piece from the 90s, I suppose, because the soundtrack is so 90s. That visual style is something you don't really get so much now, and it's got Tarantino's fingerprints are all over it, even though he's disowned it now. You can still see his DNA in it for sure. And yeah, so I picked it because, I mean, I love Woody Harrelson, we know that. I think all the cast is amazing. Tommy Lee Jones is especially good as the prison warden. The soundtrack's amazing. And that, I think it's just really interesting to have that mix of Oliver Stone and Quentin Tarantino in one film. And overall, I think I still am a fan. So that's why I've picked it.
Do you know why Tarantino has disowned it?
He didn't disown it at first. Like, he sold the script because I think he just wanted to move on to something else. I don't think there was a particular reason why he sold it. But then I think he got changed so much that he disowned it for that reason, I think.
Oh, so not necessarily he didn't think it was good. It was just he didn't think it was his anymore.
I think something like that. But he has referred to it as being like a piece of shit or something, and saying he's never watched it all the way through because he's sort of angry about it. I can't remember exactly what it was that made him fall out about it. But yeah, I don't think he disowned it because he didn't like the script or anything like that.
Did they take all the racism out of it?
Yeah, maybe.
So, I mean, it's no surprise that you've picked a Woody Harrelson movie for obvious reasons. But I was quite, well, when I saw this, I mean, obviously, I am very familiar with Woody Harrelson as Woody from Cheers. That's my main exposure to him. And then apart from that, I hadn't seen him playing any sort of baddie parts, if you like. So to see this and see him in the possibly, the most evil character, one of the most evil characters that was on film in the 90s, was definitely a jarring experience for me. But I completely agree with what you say. It's a definite landmark 90s movie in terms of sort of style and location and vehicles and things like that. So yeah, I enjoyed it for that reason as well.
Yeah. Without sending Jeff like panicking to his desk. Isn't Woody Harrelson's dad sort of famously wasn't he a hired, wasn't he an assassin or a hitman or something?
Yeah, I think he was a hitman. He was implicated in the JFK assassination, there's a link there to Oliver Stone. But yeah, he had a sort of a dodgy background, his dad, yeah.
When them people come here and they ask you who done this, you tell them Mickey and Mallory Knox did it, all right? Say it.
Mickey and Mallory Knox did it.
Mickey and Mallory Knox. I love you, Mickey.
Me and Mallory?
Right, we've all picked one film each, so I think we have an exciting interlude-based activity, don't we, Adam? What have you brought in with you?
I have brought in a little film quiz, obviously films of 94. And I want to run that competition with the two of you, if you're up for that.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to need you to buzz in with your names, but I'll read the question first. It's going to be like a sort of a three clues to each question, and after each clue you get a chance to buzz in and see if you can guess which film it is. The clues will be comprised of quotes from reviews on IMDb of these films.
Are we going to put our 90s quiz show music bed underneath this, Alex, do you think?
Oh yeah, good idea. Let's turn that on now.
There it is. Superb.
So, film one, quote one. I was left disgusted, disappointed and angry after watching the movie. I don't think a comedy movie should make you feel that way.
Stu.
Go on, Stu.
And am I frozen out if I get it wrong?
No, you can keep. We can keep going.
I'm going to make an early stab at Ace Ventura for this.
That is incorrect.
Okay, Alex, I'm going to guess the other big one, Dumb and Dumber.
Also wrong, I'm afraid. Okay, so the second quote is, why in films do people so frequently find themselves in situations where they're stuck hiding in a room whilst people have sex?
Stu.
Go on, Stu.
I'll say 4 weddings.
You are correct.
Well done.
All right.
So then do you want to hear the other quotes?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, go on.
So it's so desperate to be liked by American audiences that it turns its core subjects into stereotypes in order to pander to the overseas image of the British upper-class twit. And there was a bonus clue which I kept just because I liked it too much, even though it was obviously a real dead giveaway. Saw Hugh Grant soaking wet in a white shirt for a split of a second, and I completely forgot how awful this movie is. For a bonus point, would you like to have a go at completing or filling in the blank of the poster's tagline?
Yes, please.
So it's, he's quite engaging, she's blank.
It's got to be engaged.
You're close. It's otherwise engaged. Sorry, Stuart, gave you no chance to answer that. But yeah.
No, that's fine. I was going to say she's dead. I was going to go with the funeral bit.
Well, having not seen the film, I guess you're
yeah,
a bit disadvantaged there.
I mean, it worked for me before.
Okay, so next film. Clue 1, quote 1. Yet just another example of the film industry attempting to milk the success of a classic by creating a remake.
Oh, Stu.
Go on, Stu.
True Lies?
No, and I didn't know that was a remake.
And now I'm doubting myself that it is.
It might be the sort of film that's a remake of like an obscure French film or something, but I don't know.
Possibly.
Alex, you want to take a stab at that one?
What about, it's not the Flintstones, is it?
It is the Flintstones.
Oh, there you go.
Oh, well done.
So the other quotes were, so much effort and energy poured into the sets, costumes, and practical effects. It's a shame that everything good about this movie is then drained back out the other side by a truly terrible, tiresome chore of a plot. And quite simply, this movie stinks like a pile of dinosaur droppings. I don't know if you want to try and fill in the blank of the tagline. It's Yabba Dabba blank.
It's good.
Is it don't?
Linked to the plot.
It's not don't, I'm afraid, Alex. Stu, do you want to guess?
I can't, I'm afraid. You'll have to tell me.
It is do.
Oh, for Christ's sake.
I'm surprised that you both struggled with that one.
Stu didn't even want to give it a guess.
Well, I thought it couldn't be that obvious. Oh, there we go. Always go with the obvious answer.
Okay.
So that's one each then.
One apiece, yeah.
Okay.
Clue 1, quote 1. Charles Bronson, Eastwood, Cagney, Bogart, Norris, Schwarzenegger, Jean-Claude Van Damme, Steven Seagal, hell, even Rock Hudson would have kicked this fool's dumb ass without hesitation.
Alex.
Go on.
I'm hoping they're not talking about Keanu Reeves in Speed.
They are not.
Oh, thank God.
I'd like to go for the second one, please.
Okay. Seriously, this idiot character should have been dead in the first 5 minutes of the movie.
Idiot character.
Do you want to move on to the next clue?
Yes, please.
Yeah, we might need it.
Most of it was boring, not very entertaining, and certainly not funny. I see nothing morally right about someone showing their bare buttocks.
No, I can't, I'm afraid.
Final clue?
Yeah, go on.
The fact that he gets to be at so many special events without a clear reason is not fitting for a history film.
Stu,
go and see.
I was going to go with Forrest Gump at the start.
Yeah, it is Forrest Gump.
Well, there you have it. Again, trust your instincts.
And the tagline is, the world will never be the same once you see it through the eyes of blank.
Is it just forest?
Yeah, I should have blanked more of that, really. I think that was probably a bit too easy. Here we go, one more film. I have no idea what age group this is aimed at. It seems a too adult film for children with the abusive relationship and condom and excessive gun violence, but too childish for most adults.
Excessive gun violence.
Yeah.
I'll pass here.
Yeah, pass. Let's have the next one.
Okay. This is absolutely terrifying and not even funny. Every time blank was on screen, my fight or flight instinct went off. This is whatever the opposite of a comfort movie is.
Alex.
Go on.
It's not The Mask, is it?
It is The Mask.
So I just thought maybe they're freaked out by the Jim Carrey in The Mask.
Yeah. I heard him described, or read him described as looking like Shrek's skull.
Yeah.
Which is quite upsetting. And yeah, the final quote was, "I wish somebody stopped him." So at the moment, Stu's got 5, Alex is sitting on 3, but there is a chance with this final film for Alex to redeem himself.
Okay.
Although he will have to get both the film and the tagline. So clue 1, the fart jokes, the bipolar tone of being serious and silly, the questionable incest within the romance. It all just doesn't work for me. A highly overrated movie.
Oh, Alex.
Go on.
I was going to say The Lion King. Are there fart jokes in The Lion King? Is there incest?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's definitely fart jokes. The questionable incest, I am unsure about whether that's in there, but it is The Lion King.
Hey.
Yeah, the other quotes were, this movie deals with many grand themes. It deals with them in the same way a food processor would deal with a 3-course meal. Mash it all up into random, unpalatable rubbish. Alex, if you want to try and beat Stu to the punch with the poster quote, you might score a draw here. The tagline is, "The greatest adventure of all is finding our place in blank."
Stu.
Go on, Stu.
The Circle of Life.
It is The Circle of Life. And Stu wins at 6-4.
Well done, Stu. Well played.
Well, thank you. You were a very worthy opponent, and thanks, Adam, for putting up the questions. Enjoyed that very much.
Thanks for that little interlude there, Adam. Let's move on to our next film choices then. Stu, what's your second film?
As we've already discussed, big year for Jim Carrey, despite his nomination in the Razzies for Worst Breakout Star, or whatever the title of the award was. This is my favourite of the 3, which is Ace Ventura: Pet Detective, released on February the 4th, 1994, directed by Tom Shadyac. And this, of course, involves the abduction of the mascot of the Miami Dolphins, which Ace Ventura is hired to look into. So, of course, Dumb and Dumber and The Mask out in the same year as this. So a real huge breakout year for Jim Carrey. And whenever this film was on TV in the mid to late 90s, after it started playing on TV, always ITV as I recall, it was always a must watch for me. And I even remember turning down going out to play football on the Springfield with all of my friends who came and knocked on my door because Ace Ventura was on the TV at the time. So that just goes to show you how high I held it in my estimations at the time. My dad liked it because Dan Marino played himself, NFL legend, of course, in there. I've never actually seen Ace Ventura 2, which I believe is called When Nature Calls. I've never seen that. Were there any other ones? I think that might have been the only 2. Is that correct?
I think those are the only 2, unless they did any sort of straight to DVD spin-offs.
Righto. Maybe I should rewatch both then, or say rewatch the first one and watch the second one for the first time at some point. Legend of the pod, Alex Mitchell and I constantly quote this. Let's do all the things you want to do, like a glove, etc. That's become part of our vernacular as we've grown up. But obviously, this film has a massive problem by today's standards. It's very similar to Pulp Fiction in that I'm not sure it would be written this way anymore. Obviously, there's a huge problem with the transgender portrayal in this movie, and that's probably the reason why it doesn't get a span on ITV at tea time at the weekend as often as it used to. But there you go. That's Ace Ventura: Pet Detective. Probably my favourite film from the year at the time, if you see what I mean. It was my favourite that I was enjoying at the time.
Yes.
What about you guys? Are you familiar with this?
I have seen it, but I think I've only seen it once, and I think I enjoyed it, but for some reason I didn't love it enough to sort of revisit it. I'm really surprised that you loved it as much as you did without following up, without watching the sequel. You know,
I know.
what it was.
Yeah, that's a weird one. Maybe it just never came on the TV, and I was hoping that it would. It just seemed right for me to watch Ace Ventura on the TV. I couldn't possibly watch it any other way. And then, if I have seen it, I can't remember it. So, I will need to catch up with that as soon as I can. But is this... I mean, I don't know. Out of the 3 Carey films of the year, is this possibly the one that's least well remembered? I mean, is The Mask and Dumb and Dumber higher up in the list of great Carey movies than this? Am I just remembering it through a child's lens, if you see what I mean?
I think it's still... I think it's bigger than The Mask, maybe. I think The Mask is a little bit more cult than Ace Ventura. I don't know what the takings were for The Mask compared to this. I mean, they were all massive, weren't they? That's the thing. Like, for his breakout year to have 3... Apparently, he's the only actor that's had his first... No, not even his first. He's just the only actor to have 3 films in the same year all go to number 1 in the box office. So, pretty wild that he... Yeah.
They did do a sequel to The Mask, I think, but I don't think he was in it. I think it was Son of the Mask or something along those lines, like a sort of a semi-spin-off.
I remember the cartoon series of The Mask very well.
Unless I'm thinking of that. I do have a feeling that maybe a few years later they did a sequel and it was not very well received.
What do you want?
HDS, sir. And how are you this afternoon? All righty then. I have a package for you.
Adam, what was your second choice?
My second choice is, we've already sort of talked about it a little bit, and there is a little bit of a link in terms of sort of problematic dealing with a transgender character, and it's Naked Gun 33 1/3, which I rewatched, I think, for the first time since 94. I must have watched it in between there, but it feels like there's been a long time since I watched it. And I had quite high hopes for rewatching it. It was the sort of film where I thought, this whole trilogy is great. It might not be to everyone's taste, but I think it's great. And I would have previously not quite picked that as a hill to die on, but I would have been quite like defensive of this film. But having rewatched it, I found very little to enjoy in it, unfortunately. It felt like really, really nowhere near as good as I remembered. And I do think that the first 2, I think I've watched the second one relatively recently and thought that still held up. So I don't know what changed, whether it was like a change in writers or something, if they just sort of ran out of steam, but it felt quite lazy compared to the first 2 and not very funny, and leaned quite heavily on sort of gay panic. And yeah, there was quite a big transphobic sort of plot point in it. I don't know if either of you have seen it recently, or the last time either of you two have seen it.
I've not seen it recently, but I definitely agree with your assessment that it's the weakest of the 3. It's probably the law of diminishing returns, isn't it? A third movie in a series is probably going to be the weakest of the 3, if there are 3 in the series. And then, of course, they went on to do Spy Hard, which I'll definitely be talking about in when we get to the movies of 1996 in a little while, which is not Frank Drebin. It's a different character, but it's much the same sort of thing, and is, if anything, even worse than Naked Gun 33 1/3.
I did see, this is one of the few films that was out this year that I did actually see at the cinema. And I think I must have thought it was great at the time, in the way that you sort of think anything that you see at the cinema is great. But by the time Spy Hard came out, I think even then I was like, this is no Naked Gun.
I mean, the original Police Squad series is absolutely fantastic, of course, as well, which is where the Frank Drebin character came from in the first place. That's probably stronger than any of the Naked Gun films, I would say, the Police Squad series that it came from. So, yeah, there we go.
It is also quite hard to enjoy a film when you know that one of the main characters, or not main characters, but like a prominent character in it, is a murderer.
Yeah, it's especially for a comedy.
Yeah, takes the edge off it a little bit, doesn't it? Although I'll put that to one side when I watch the first two.
You call this slop? Real slop has got chunks of things in it. This is more like gruel. And this Chateau LeBlanc 68 is supposed to be served slightly chilled. This ain't room temperature.
So the second film I'm going to talk about is, again, follows on. It's sort of a trend for all these second films we're talking about, because I'm talking about Dumb and Dumber, one of the other Jim Carrey films from the year, directed by the Farrelly brothers and written by one of the Farrelly brothers as well, starring, of course, Jim Carrey and Jeff Daniels. It's like a classic screwball comedy following two characters, Lloyd Christmas and Harry Dunn, as they make a road trip across the US. So it's another film that's a road trip. I'm a sucker for a road trip movie for sure. That's the second of two just in this episode alone I'm talking about. And I mean, you know, everyone knows what the film is like. It's proper Route One comedy. There is nothing clever about this. There's no sort of clever plot lines. It's not witty or sharp or anything like that. It's toilet humor, but it's done about as well as it's ever been done, I think, because it still stands up. I watched it again last week and I still think it's really funny. There is, of course, some stuff that doesn't really stand up anymore and is a bit problematic, like there is with so many films from the 90s. But generally, I think it still stands up really well. Are there any funnier lines from 90s cinema than the "Would you like to hear the most annoying noise in the world"? It's one of the finest comedy moments from the 90s. And apparently that was ad-libbed by Jim Carrey, which I think makes it even better.
And he was still nominated for Worst Breakout Star of the Year. I can't believe this. I'm getting as righteous about this, Alex, as you were about Woody Harrelson's nominations a couple of years back.
When you were talking about Dumb and Dumber, it did remind me of one of my favourite lines from that film, which is when they're in the diner and he says to the waiter, "What's the soup du jour?" And she says, "It's the soup of the day." And he says, "Oh, sounds delicious. I'll have that." It's just something about that line gets me every single time.
One thing I remember about this one is that it was in my folks' VHS collection, which not many movies were at that point, only real big hitters. So
I have a couple of facts here about it, which I think are quite wild. Apparently, Jim Carrey was originally going to be paid about something like $500,000 or something for it originally. And then as he was negotiating his fee, Ace Ventura went to number one in the box office and he was able to up his fee to $7 million. Whereas, well, do you want to guess how much Jeff Daniels got for his role in it? If Jim Carrey got $7 million?
I'll guess that he got $500,000.
He actually got $50,000. He didn't even get $500,000.
Wow.
He got offered so little because the producers didn't actually want him to take the role for some reason. I don't know why they were offering it to him if they didn't want him to take it, but they were trying to put him off. But he just insisted that he was going to do it. His agent said, "Don't do it. It'll ruin your career." And he stuck with it. I think it's still his highest grossing film ever. So it paid off for sure for him. But then tied into that, do you know who they were originally considering for the roles of Lloyd and Harry? I mean, you'll never guess because it's so weird.
O.J. Simpson.
Not quite that weird. It was Nicolas Cage and Gary Oldman.
I did hear that, yeah.
It sounds like a sort of a gritty, violent crime road trip movie, doesn't it? With those two in it, I think.
Hey. Want to hear the most annoying sound in the world? Guys!
Fellas, you think we could listen to the radio or something?
Right, so let's move on to our third and final choices then. Stu, what's your third choice?
I have gone for my final choice with Ed Wood. Release date September the 30th, 1994, directed by Tim Burton. This is a dramatisation of the life and career of the infamous Hollywood director Ed Wood Jr., played by Johnny Depp in the movie, and examines his relationship with the formerly famous actor Bela Lugosi. So I've wanted to watch this movie for a long time, finally got around to it a few months ago. And this all stems from a book that my dad had on his shelf many years ago called The Incredibly Strange Film Book by Jonathan Ross, as it happens. And this was a book of a TV show, which was The Incredibly Strange Film Show, I think, or something like that. And the titles are very similar. But this book was all about sort of bad films, bad directors from the 50s and 60s. So things that have since been made famous by sort of YouTube clips and clip shows and things like that. So, but these were things that hadn't been seen really on screens in the UK before then. And I would leaf through this book from time to time. And as such, I developed a little bit of an interest in sort of infamously bad directors and movies and things like that. So this film intrigued me. I managed to convince wife of the pod, Beth, to watch it with me because it's got Bill Murray in it. So that was a winner. She's a big Bill fan. So I managed to get it past her on that front. Incidentally, Ed Wood Jr. passed away exactly 10 years to the day before I was born. So again, I'm probably seeing a connection that isn't actually there, but there you go. So yeah, it's completely in black and white. It's as you would expect a Tim Burton movie to be, and it portrays Ed Wood and his sort of loyal gang of crew members very sympathetically indeed. So I really enjoyed this outline of his work and career and getting to look at things a little bit deeper. I understand that it's not a true sort of reflection of everything that went on. Certain things have been dramatized or changed, obviously, to make it a good movie, but still a good look at somebody who has, well, like I say, infamous, but I think he's really sort of revered now in certain film circles for the sort of films he made and the things he did. So yeah, have either of you guys seen this?
I have, yeah. Mm-hmm. I'm not a huge fan of Tim Burton. He's someone who, when I rewatch the films of his that I thought I liked, I've realised I've sort of gone off them a little bit. But I do think if I rewatched this, I would still feel quite affectionately of it. It doesn't feel too Tim Burton-y for me, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if Ed Wood's sort of like the way that people sort of revisited him and sort of reassessed how they feel about him is maybe to do with this film, because for a lot of people, Tim Burton is more famous than he was. So maybe he sort of brought shone a new light on his work and that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's not a film I have seen, and he's not a person I know anything about, unfortunately, Ed Wood. So it sounds like something that I should go out of my way to watch, because it would be an educational experience for both reasons, the film itself and the man it's portraying. I'm not a massive fan of Johnny Depp. Oh, no, sorry. Let me rephrase that. I think Johnny Depp is a dick. I'm not a fan of Tim Burton particularly. So those things considered, it wouldn't have been top of my list until you both said that it's good. So I do think I'll seek it out.
You think it takes talent to play Frankenstein? It's all makeup and grunting.
Bella, I agree 100%. Now, Dracula, that's a role that requires talent.
Adam, what's your third and final film?
My third and final film is The Crow, which is another film which I haven't rewatched until recently, since watching it the first time. Obviously, I didn't see it at the cinema at the time because I think it wasn't 18. So I would have seen it at some point whilst a teenager, probably rented it on video or saw it on late night on Channel 4. And this is a film that's obviously most famous probably for the tragic death of its star, Brandon Lee, who died whilst filming. And as such, I feel a little bit bad making fun of this film or being critical of this film, because it's obviously quite a tragic story. But it is a film which is inherently quite silly, sort of based on a comic book which was written by someone who also had suffered quite a tragic backstory. So again, I feel quite bad. But as I said, the film is quite silly. So it's the story is about a young man who he and his, I don't know if they've just been married or they're about to be married. They're killed by some bad guys, some sort of comical gang, exaggerated sort of caricatures of bad guys. And due to the tragic nature of their deaths, a mystical crow 1 year to the day of their deaths brings back the guy, brings him back. He digs himself out of the grave and comes back to sort of seek vengeance on the people that killed him and his fiancée. And the main thing that I wanted to sort of suggest or ask your thoughts on is that he like a major plot point or a big part of his character is that he was like a guitarist in sort of like a grunge band called Hangman's Joke, I think. And I wanted to ask what you thought that film would be like if he had been a musician of a different genre, if he had been, say, a folk musician.
Or in a ska band.
Yeah, because so much of the film following is very like moody and sort of grungy, and yeah, sort of the whole aesthetic is defined by the fact that he played like electric guitar in this grunge band. Like there's a couple of sequences where he's playing guitar solos on the roof in the rain, like whilst like grieving for his wife and plotting like revenge on these bad guys. And I wonder if that would have been the same if he was playing like the accordion.
It would certainly have been a different movie, that's for sure.
I mean, that is, from what I remember, that was what I didn't like about him. I can't remember if I saw it as a sort of younger teen or if it was when I was at uni, but I remember going to uni with people who thought it was really great and really loved it. And I just never did. And I just thought it was corny is the best word I have for it, really. It's like, it's trying so hard to look cool and be edgy, but it's like what a, kind of like what you said, it's like what a 14-year-old thinks is cool.
Yeah.
It's just too, it's going for style, and it's just coming out sort of a bit laughable. And I don't remember Brandon Lee being a very good actor.
No,
unfortunate to say.
Yeah, he wasn't. In terms of his legacy, sort of dying whilst making this film was sort of great in terms of his legacy, although like very sad for him as a person. It's hard to imagine him going on to do many other great films or being sort of celebrated as a great actor. I don't know what else he did previous to this, but I guess that sort of in itself says quite a bit. And it is definitely a film that's style over substance. There's a lot of, it sort of lacks a lot of logic within it. There's a lot of things which happen because it will look good on screen rather than it makes any sense for a character to do. And another point I wanted to make is no one freaks out nearly enough to meet him again, considering he died tragically 1 year previously and was buried. When they all very quick to accept, oh, you're back from the dead, except you are still dead and you're immortal now. It's just very, that's sort of mentioned in passing, and they all sort of just move on pretty quickly. Another actor whose name I've forgotten, who is Guy of Gisborne in Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, and he plays evil in like a particularly good way. He sort of really did that in this, but he was the sort of character who has a sword collection behind a big like steel safe in his rooftop bad guy like penthouse. Is a little bit, like you said, the sort of thing that a 14-year-old thinks is cool. I think if we found out that Elon Musk had a safe where he had like a collection of samurai swords in, everyone would be like, yeah, of course he does.
I'm not going to kill you. Your job will be to tell the rest of them that death is coming for them tonight.
Okay, my final film is Speed. It's been mentioned a couple of times already. Directed by Jan de Bont. It was his first film, his first feature film at least. He'd been the director of photography on Die Hard and The Hunt for Red October, which I didn't know until I was researching this episode. And apparently Joss Whedon wrote a lot of the script as well, which I had no idea about. It's not the sort of thing I really associate with Joss Whedon, but he did a good job as far as I can tell, because I've chosen it as, I think, maybe my favourite action film of all time. Not just of this year, but of all time. It's definitely up there with maybe Terminator 2, because it's just a proper good, solid action film. It's like so lean and to the point, and it does exactly what you want from an action film. There's not a lot of like flapping around at the beginning with a long backstory. There's not a huge kind of outro where there's loads of stuff you don't need to see. There's not loads of exposition. It's just people on the bus that can't go below 50 miles an hour or it'll blow up. It's like a great premise. It's one of those things where the premise alone gets you hooked. It's obviously Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock, the two main roles, and Dennis Hopper plays the baddie. Jeff Daniels is in it as well. parodied in one of the greatest Father Ted episodes of all time, Speed 3, which makes me like both things even more. And it just feels a little bit like they don't make action films like this anymore. I know all millennials say stuff like this. It's like, it's a bit of a cliche. And maybe I'm completely wrong, but do they make action films like this anymore? Or is it all just Marvel?
I'm not too sure. I think there are sort of films that have quite high concepts, but maybe either the concepts aren't as good or the stars aren't quite the same, or it could just be that our attitudes towards them have changed. Like we want something that's like a little bit more like knowing, or like, I don't know, like I think maybe we have too much irony in our comedy now, and it would be impossible to make Speed, because it's sort of, even though there are moments of sort of lightness or of humor in it, it's never really at the expense of the tone of the film, if that makes sense, or at the expense of the characters. It's sort of it plays itself quite straight. There's never any like little winks to camera or anything like that. If it was made today, it would have The Rock or Chris Pratt in it probably, and I don't know. I don't know if it would work in quite the same way.
I mean, I've never seen it, so I can't really add anything to this, which is probably a criminal offence, as I often commit on these episodes when it turns out that I haven't seen one of the classics of the decade or whatever year we're talking about. But of course, there is the scene in the aforementioned Spy Hard which parodies Speed, with Ray Charles as the bus driver, which is probably the best scene in the film.
To go back to your point just now, Alex, even if they do try to make films along those sorts of lines now, you don't really tend to get anything like Speed was. You see Speed used as a way to pitch other films now. People will say it's Speed on this or Speed on that, and I don't think you get many films that have been made since then which people use as a way to describe other films. Like you get it with Die Hard on a thing, Die Hard on a that.
I mean, maybe I'm not qualified to say this, but it feels a bit like the 90s were the era of the great action movie. I know there's big ones in the 80s, and the 70s had their own sort of style of action movie, but the 90s was when they were real blockbusters. I don't know. It's hard not to look through rose-tinted nostalgia glasses, isn't it, with everything we talk about? But
another quick theory which just popped into my head about why Speed and films from that era stand up better now, or maybe like feel different, is it was sort of pre-CGI, whereas now it would be quite easy to make a film like that, and it would be so reliant on CGI that maybe it sort of cheapened it, whereas then they would have had to spend a lot of money on it, and it sort of therefore feels either more real or more spectacular, or they had to be more selective with what they threw the money at. So like it's sort of, they're forced to be like sharper, and the script has to be better and the film has to be better, whereas now it could just be like, well, let's just throw in an explosion here, like this can blow up now, like drive this car through this, that, or the other. Whereas then it was like, well, we've only got this much money, so we're gonna have to make these set pieces like really work.
50! Stay above 50! All right?
so that was our 3 films each there. Let's just quickly have some honourable mentions. I'm sure you guys will have some films that you would have liked to have talked about if you'd had a bit more time. Was there anything that you feel like we missed or should have talked about? Stu?
Just one honourable mention to me for a movie, again, another mention for Gary Oldman, actually, one that he was in this time, a movie called Romeo is Bleeding, which was very poorly received. But can you guess from the title of the movie why I've chosen this?
From the title? No, I was going to say something to do with Aston Villa, but I can't link that to...
Is Mark Bosnich in it?
in a cameo, yes, in an uncredited cameo. Well, let me give you a further clue. This Romeo is bleeding. You can see his blood.
Straits? Is it with Dire Straits? Something else.
Boy, I really think this would have been easier to get for you guys. This is the movie that John Bon Jovi wrote the song Always for, the biggest hit Bon Jovi ever had. But he refused then to give them the track after he'd seen the completed movie. And then it went on to later become the biggest hit they'd ever had, independent of the movie. He recorded in 2004. The script was great. The movie wasn't. So I just wanted to give Romeo is Bleeding a mention for that link to a rock great.
Adam, do you have any mentions?
Yeah, I would have liked to. I ended up talking about two films which I really didn't like, and that was sort of unfortunate. I think you picked Speed and Dumb and Dumber. They were sort of taken before. I would have maybe sort of revisited them. So I sort of regret watching The Crow and Naked Gun. But there were some good films out this year, which I would have liked to have talked about, which is would have been including Wes Craven's New Nightmare, which is I watched relatively recently after reading sort of good things about it, and it seems like it's not as well known as some of his other films, but it's a really great idea for a horror film where Wes Craven is in it as a character, and it's sort of set in the world where the Nightmare on Elm Street films exist, but Freddy Krueger is coming out of the film somehow. Like he's somehow found a way to cross over into real life, and is sort of terrorizing like the original actors or screenwriters or something like that. It's sort of like quite a cool like meta idea. Like it came up before Scream, and obviously Scream more famously played with the conventions of horror films and stuff. But it's if you're looking for something like fun and scary to watch next Halloween, I would recommend that. Other films I'm surprised which we didn't get around to mentioning is Clerks, Shawshank Redemption, and no, just those two. Those are the two that I thought I was surprised that we didn't really touch on.
Yeah, I mean, Shawshank's weird, isn't it? Because it was a flop when it first came out, and it's only later that it became massive and got all this respect, because it wasn't in any of those awards lists. Well, not for the main awards. I don't know if it was anything lower down. I don't think it was in the top 10, was it? No. And now it's seen as one of the greatest films of all time. It is really odd. It's like the ultimate sleeper hit, isn't it? I think, and it is amazing as well. I think it is really good. And Clerks was on my list as well. Is it maybe the quintessential cult film, or cult low budget film at least? It's a lot of fun.
I think when we get to 1999, there might be another low budget cult film which might challenge that.
Yes,
spot.
Yes, true. The only other thing I had on my list, and I mean, we didn't talk about Forrest Gump really. That's like one of the two biggest films of the year, and I think is still really good. The only other thing I had on my list was Hoop Dreams, which I think is a really good low budget but a really interesting documentary about college kids trying to get into high school kids trying to get into college to play basketball. It's a really good documentary about that, basically. And also, it was a big year for Christmas films because there was Miracle on 34th Street and The Santa Claus both came out this year. But it feels a bit weird talking about them in February, so we won't cover them. But all in all, do we think it was a good year for film?
I think so. I've heard people say that 94, 97 and 99 were like, I've heard people like pit those years against each other as being the best year for cinema. I don't know if they mean of all time or just in the 90s, but they hold those years up as being particularly good. And when you look at like Pulp Fiction and Shawshank and Clerks, and like all of the other ones, not all the ones we've mentioned, but other ones we've not mentioned, and some of the ones you've touched on, it's sort of hard to say that it was not a good year.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that. I think you've summed that up perfectly. There are so many great all-time movies, even just on the highest grossing list, and then even like we say, the Shawshank Redemption doesn't appear on the highest grossing list, so there's plenty there to be getting on with. I think one of the best years we've probably had so far in this little odyssey that we've been on.
Right, so that is the films of 1994 done. Adam, thank you so much for coming on. Do you want to give us a quick update on how Jimmy's Crickets are getting on before you go?
We are doing well. I'm in the process of thinking about starting to plan, putting together some ideas for a shirt. So that's been probably a year that I've been thinking about doing that, but I'm pretty keen to get that happening at some point this decade.
Excellent. Well, we are ready and waiting to stick our logo on the front of it whenever it's ready. So keep us updated on that. But thanks again for coming on, talking about potentially one of the best years in film of the decade. We really appreciate input. So we'll see you again soon.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks again to Adam for coming on and talking about the films of 1994. There were some, really good films mentioned there. It was great to have a chat with him again. If you, the listener, would like to get in touch and tell us any of your favourite films from 1994 or what you think we missed off or anything you think is terrible from the year and your reasonings for that, please do get in touch using our link tree, which you can find linked to below. It's linktr.ee/allright90s podcast. And yes, just click on the link below and you'll find links to our Twitter and our Instagram and our YouTube and all the places you can listen to our podcast. Stu, what are your final thoughts?
Well, it's just nice to be back on our 90s movie odyssey, isn't it? I say 94, I think a very strong year. And looking forward to seeing what 95 brings when we get around to that. But I think it would be hard pressed to beat that collection.
Absolutely, yes. We don't know what we're doing next week, do we, Stu? It's one of life's great mysteries. What is the podcast doing next time?
As always, but I would just like to say before we go, many thanks to everybody who attended our first ever 90s night down at the Three Crowns on Saturday, February the 10th. Very well received. And we hope to be able to come back and do something for you again soon. So thanks to everybody who came down and said hello. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, it was an amazing night. Thanks to the Three Crowns for having us. Until next time, where we'll be doing something else equally nostalgic, I am just off to see if the Springfield Centre's got any more Panda Lemonade left in the vending machines.
Take care for now, everybody. I'm just off to Germany to go and get some Woolworths Pick-a-Mix.
Cheerio.
Bye for now.